Hi everyone! Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of the Spook Notes podcast, where we get academic about everything that goes bump in the night. I'm Marlena.
And I'm Connor.
And on today's episode, we will be talking about...
Alien, from 1979.
Ridley Scott's.
Yes, his second movie. So, on this week's episode, we're going to be focusing on just one movie. Last week, we did 3 different movies in the form of the Dead series by George A. Romero. And while we really liked that, and we hope that you guys did too, this week we decided just to focus on one movie to make it a little easier on ourselves and just so we can go more in depth with just this one movie. Because I think or at least I really like it. I mean, Marlene, you just saw it for the first time like a week ago.
Okay, well, this is partially true.
Partially true.
The first time I saw it, I actually fell asleep within the first 15 minutes of it being on. Not that it was a bad movie or anything. I was just, really tired.
I will say the first hour of it is much slower than the second hour. It's more of a build-up to the dinner scene, obviously.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, within definitely the last week, that was pretty much my first time seeing this movie. So it's still fresh in my brain, So,
and what'd you think of it? I mean, watching it for the first time.
I liked it. It was a good movie.
I just like it so much more because I have the nostalgia for it. And so it's one of my all-time favorite horror movies.
Yeah.
So we're going to start off with the synopsis, and from now on, when we do the synopsis, we're probably going to go a little bit more in depth just to help out any listener who might not have seen the movie. Obviously, we recommend that you do check out the movie before listening to the podcast if you haven't seen it, because we'll be talking about spoilers. And it's just a classic movie that I think we think you should see. So anyways, here's a synopsis of Alien. So the movie follows a spacecraft/mining vessel out in deep space called the Nostromo, and its 7 blue-collar crew members, as they awaken from hypersleep. They find that they are only halfway to Earth because they've received orders from the company that they work for, and this movie is simply called The Company, to investigate a signal that they found on a planet somewhere out deep in space, a desolate planet. So they go to the planet, and once they land on the planet, a small team goes to investigate the signal, and what they find is a massive alien ship that's unlike anything they've ever seen before. And inside the ship is a corpse of what looks like whatever was piloting it, and they find that in its ribcage has been burst open, and they're not sure what's done this. So once they explore the ship a little farther, they find a collection of eggs. One of the people on the team, Executive Officer Kane, gets too close to one of the eggs, and it hatches, and a small, kind of hand-looking alien leaps out from the egg and attaches itself to Kane's face. Eventually, the others get Kane back to the ship, where they find out that the creature has kind of latched itself onto Kane and won't let go. They find out that the creature is feeding him oxygen while choking him at the same time to kind of create a symbiotic relationship, and that the creature has acid blood, which makes it really hard to get off, obviously, because they're in space, and, acid eating away at a ship in space.
It's not really the best combination.
No. Soon, however, the creature falls off of Kane and dies. And Kane feels better. He gets back on his feet and everything seems fine. So what they plan to do is to go back into hypersleep to wait until they reach Earth, finally. But that night, they're having one last dinner before they go back to bed. And Kane begins to convulse, and he's choking on something, and they're not sure what's going on. And eventually, he flips over onto the table, and a small, kind of phallic-looking creature pops out of his chest, killing him and showering the crew in blood. And it's the iconic chest burster scene, right? I feel like everybody knows that scene.
Yeah, even, having seen this movie, or have seen this movie, I still know the scene. It's very iconic.
Yeah. So after Kane dies, the other crew members go out to find the alien, and when one crew member goes off alone, his name is Brett, he finds out that the alien has grown much bigger, since we see kind of the skin that the alien has shed, and then Brett is attacked by an alien that we now see is much bigger. Slowly, the alien starts to kill off all the crew members one by one, until there's only 4 crew members left. One of those being Ripley, who is our main kind of character in this movie. She is played by Sigourney Weaver, obviously, in her breakout performance that led to her becoming a star.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyways, once a lot of the other crew members have died off, Ripley goes to find answers from the ship's computer called Mother. Once there, she finds out that the company had sent the crew to this planet specifically to find the alien and to bring it back to Earth, and that the crew were expendable. Upon discovering this, she also finds out that one of the other crew members with them, the scientist officer Ash, is actually an android working for the company. Ash tries to kill Ripley, but eventually he's killed himself by another one of the crew members. Eventually, Ripley and the 2 other crew members that remain try to get off the ship by escaping in the, I guess this is like the life pod or something like that.
Like an escape pod type thing.
Yeah. So they try to escape. They plan to blow up the ship with the alien on it. But before they can do that, the last 2 crew members are killed, and it's just Ripley and the cat that's left. Who also, I found out, actually is male, not female.
Oh. But we'll get into that later.
At least that's what the internet says.
Yeah.
So anyways, Ripley and the cat try to escape in the escape pod, and they do so, blowing up the Nostromo. But what they find is that the alien has actually stowed away in the escape pod. So, to get rid of it once and for all, Ripley opens the escape pod's doors and pushes the alien out into space, dropping it in the cold, nothingness of space.
Mm-hmm.
And the film ends with Ripley giving kind of a monologue explaining what's happened, a kind of audio diary, and then her and the cat Jonesy going back into hyperspace, or hypersleep.
Hypersleep. In hyperspace.
In space.
In space. Aliens.
So, that's kind of the synopsis of Aliens. I didn't go into too depth. I didn't introduce all the characters, but those are just some of the main points.
Well, yeah, and then that's your guys' job to go and watch the movie and kind of fill in the gaps. So, yeah.
So, now we get into the section where we explain other people's opinions. This movie has a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, an 8.5 on IMDb, and an 83% on Metacritic.
So overall, it's kind of a classic.
Well,
right?
It is a classic nowadays, but when it first came out, it actually received mixed to negative reviews. And I find that that's kind of like a theme that I've found in all the movies that we do, is that when it comes out, it's not...
It just, not a lot of people like it, but...
It was the same thing with, like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and even, like, Night of the Living Dead. Like, when these movies first come out, like, I don't think they're appreciated like they are today.
You gotta think of it as, like, wine. It gets better with age,
Well, you know what it makes me think of? Is, like, it makes me think about, like, what movies have come out recently that most people didn't like, that in, like, 20, 30 years they can be considered classics.
I don't know. I think everything nowadays, like, modern movies are more, like, better reviewed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're
more people like them. Like, for instance, It. Come on, like...
Well,
It first off was very good, but,
Well, one movie that I think of that is kind of like the modern day version of that is Saw. Because, I mean, like, I feel like when it first came out, most people didn't like Saw.
Yeah.
But now I think a lot of people really like it. Like, it's considered, like, one of the best movies of the 2000s. Yeah. Horror movies, at least. Anyways, that was kind of a tangent.
Sorry, guys. We tend to do that. We think out loud.
But yeah, anyways, obviously, Alien is now considered a classic. It started the careers of Ridley Scott, who went on to direct lots of films like Blade Runner and Gladiator, and stuff like that. One
little interesting fact about Ridley Scott, he was in his early 20s when he directed this movie.
Yeah, so like our age.
Yeah, and that's just, for me anyways, it's just really cool to think somebody who's my age having the ability to create such a movie that's like...
And this wasn't even his first movie.
Yeah, and it's just like, oh my god, literally this is such a...
wake-up call.
Yeah, it's like, god, I gotta get my life together,
And obviously, as we mentioned before, it also started the career of Sigourney Weaver, who would go on to be in Ghostbusters and lots of other stuff. The other thing that this started is obviously the Alien franchise. I mean, this movie had 3 direct sequels. It has 2 sequels now, modern sequels in Prometheus and Alien Covenant. It had the whole Alien versus Predator franchise. Mm-hmm. There were so many comic books and video games and toys and whatnot based on this. Like, Alien is a huge franchise today in modern cinema. Yeah. So, another thing I found out was that this movie is actually in the Library of Congress, preserved there.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
That's funny.
So, I mean, really, it's just an enduring classic, and I think it's one that if you're a horror fan or even a sci-fi fan, because it kind of is in both of those genres, you got to go see it.
Yeah. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about the background of the movie and anything that was that helped inspire the film. So first off, the chest-bursting alien was actually inspired by a real life monster called parasitoid wasps. So this particular group of wasps, which encompasses multiple species, actually lay their eggs in caterpillars, beetles, insects, and other bugs. When the eggs hatch, they actually crunch their way out of their living incubator, just like Ridley Scott's Alien. One wasp species, called the Dinocampus
coccinellini, it's a Latin name.
Science terms. Targets ladybugs, which then sit on the wasp larvae, much like zombie nannies. The partially paralyzed but still living ladybug hosts usually die during this process. About 25% survive, that according to a 2011 study. However, that is still better than the rate of the cast in Alien. So, possibly, this is why you might hear a buzzing noise when the alien is on screen within the film. Maybe this is attributed to the insect that it's based upon. Yeah. So, much like the insect we've been talking about, in the movie, the alien actually builds a nest and sheds different types of skins, much like this insect would. So, the parallel between the insect and the alien is kind of seamless, really. They have similar qualities.
And, well, because the other thing that the reason why I think we thought of this is because actually in the later movies, like especially Aliens, the sequel to this movie, like the xenomorphs act way more insectoid because they kind of like crawl and skitter around, and they have like a larger kind of like not a beehive, but that kind of same structure with like lots of different like tunnels and things like that. And then obviously the main connection is that the alien leader is called the alien queen, just like in
like exactly
in
like
beehive you'd have the queen bee or whatever.
Yeah. So
I definitely think that the alien was inspired by kind of an insectoid-like creature, specifically these bees and wasps, which, by the way, that idea is just terrifying.
Well, yeah. Jeez, like having something like lay eggs inside you and just burst on out at you, like, ugh, I don't know, that's pretty gross if you ask me. That wouldn't be a pleasant experience.
And speaking of which, I mean, another one of the inspirations for the chest burster was the fact that the writer of the film, Dan O'Bannon, who's actually a famous writer, he also directed Return of the Living Dead. He also got the idea for the chest burster that he then researched and found out about these insects from these kind of severe stomach pains he had, where like he would like. I read this thing where he described that he would like writhe around on the floor of his bathroom for like hours in like agony because his chest hurt so much and it felt like something was going to burst out of him. And he's like, what if like something did actually burst out of you? And that's kind of where he got the idea for that.
Well, yeah, in the dinner scene, that's probably like, oh my god, that's spot on. That's exactly what I was feeling.
Yeah.
Another interesting fact about the movie Alien is that it actually came out a year after the movie Halloween. And it's very interesting because you have the main killer, and the way it kills off its characters is very similar to Michael Myers in Halloween, is that it kills it off, or the alien kills them off one by one.
Yeah, and so the Alien really follows kind of the same slasher format established by Halloween. As we mentioned, with the killer killing people off one by one, but also because in both films there's like a final girl there's a female character is the only character that survives the attacks.
Mhm.
And in both films, they're strong protagonists. And, well, behind the scenes, I mean, both of them are pretty famous actresses as well.
That's true. They did a good job for themselves.
And so obviously that trope is called the final girl trope of slasher films. So I just thought it was interesting because we often think of Alien as kind of a sci-fi horror, but really to me, it is also kind of a slasher movie in a way.
Oh no, you're absolutely right. Literally, just even its killing, like, especially with this tail, it's like slasher.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely. That's why I sometimes even include the Alien when I think of like iconic slasher villains like Michael Myers and Jason and Freddy. I think the Alien's up there as well.
Oh yeah, he's definitely a brutal creature.
Hmm.
So, yeah, and our last interesting fact that kind of inspired the background of this movie is that Ridley Scott, he was a huge fan of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and what he wanted to do is try to create a similar movie in the sense that it was almost like realistic. Because, well, you were saying before that.
Basically, that both of these films, you could. We both know that they didn't happen, Texas Chainsaw and Alien, but you feel like they could. Texas Chainsaw, obviously, because, I mean, anybody could take up a chainsaw and kill some people.
Well, as we mentioned before in our previous podcast, that Texas Chainsaw was actually inspired by our boy, Ed Gein. So,
Plug.
so technically, you're right.
Yeah.
It could happen.
And then with Alien, I mean, like, it seems realistic to me because not because of the fact that they're in space, but because you imagine like in 1,000 years or whatever. I feel like this is what space travel will be. It'll become so benign that any blue collar kind of trucker could work in space, and that's kind of like what the characters in Alien are. Um, they all kind of they are really concerned about the money, and they're kind of lazy, and they don't really want to do their job, and they just work for the company, and they just want to go home.
Well, even their appearance in itself is not like the stereotypical like astronaut scientist. It's just like it looks like trucker gear.
Yeah, and
You
like
know?
the spaceship isn't even like it's not clean and sterile like a lot of spaceships. It's kind of dirty and grungy.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So yeah, so both these films I think capture kind of the visceral horror. And really, I do consider Alien basically the Texas Chainsaw Massacre in space.
Yeah. Because essentially, there's no intellectual or psychological horror that's kind of going on here. Like maybe if you're being chased, you're thinking, "Oh my god, like, oh, is he gonna get me?" But really, it's kind of down to the bodily horror that you're just gonna get eaten alive by an alien.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Or be killed because the alien like bursts
came
out of
right
your
out of your
chest.
chest. Yeah.
So now we're just going to get into our personal opinions about the movie. We've kind of touched on them a little bit, but I mean, I think I have a lot of personal history with this movie. You not so much.
No.
I mean, I'd probably consider this in my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time, to be honest. Another fun fact is, I don't know if you know this or if you read this, but it's probably also the horror movie I've seen more times than any other horror movie.
Oh, I believe that.
I've seen it 6 times, including when I was a kid. I've seen it in a movie theater.
Well, and you also just have so much alien memorabilia stuff. Like you have that thing, like that statue in your
The
room.
bobblehead.
Oh, you got the bobblehead. You got the games. Or
I've also owned Alien on Blu-ray like 3 times.
why 3 times?
Well, because first I owned it just by itself, then
Oh,
I bought
Jesus.
all of the Alien films together. Wait, no, maybe it's only 2 times. But whatever.
Yeah, alien super fan over here.
Well, I think the reason that I like it so much is because it was actually an early horror movie for me. I saw it when I was a kid because my older brother, Eric, he loved the Alien movies and the Predator movies, and obviously the Alien versus Predator movies.
Mm-hmm.
And he was really into them as a kid and anything related to them. Like, we played video games about them. Like, there was, like, books and comics and stuff. And so, because my older brother was into them so much, I kind of got into it as well. And I think that's where it came from. And then it was something that we kind of bonded over a little bit. Like,
Aw, that's so nice.
so I definitely think I have kind of a nostalgic.
Got a tear in my eye. Just kidding.
Well, I mean, what about you? What are your opinions about the movie?
Okay, you guys are gonna laugh, but the first time I saw this movie, I actually fell asleep. Maybe because I was just tired, like, I don't know, long day. But I fell asleep during the first time I saw it, which was a month ago. I However, we knew we wanted to do a podcast on Alien, so obviously I had to rewatch this and try to stay awake. I almost fell asleep the second time. Not because it's a bad movie, just because I'm a shit person.
Well, the first hour of it, I will admit, is slow until you get up to the chest bursting scene.
Honestly, I didn't think it was that bad.
Well, no, but I mean, slow doesn't necessarily mean bad.
Yeah.
Like, I also think parts of The Shining are slow, but it's my favorite horror movie of all time.
No.
Or
It's
one
the
of them.
best movie. It's massive. It's just perfect.
Yeah.
Can't believe you'd say that. I can't believe you've done this.
Anyways.
Yeah, but anyways, like, after I saw the movie, you know, I thought it was pretty good. I don't know what else to really add. I don't really have that nostalgic connection like you do. I just thought it was a good movie, you know,
Yeah.
a good sci-fi alien flick.
Yeah,
So yeah.
Now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the podcast, and we're going to talk about a few of the major themes and kind of analyze the movie in a deeper way now. Starting with...
Yeah, so one thing, it's not so much a theme. It's more so just like kind of like a concept that we were kind of, you know, passing back and forth to each other, is Gothic nature and how it's reflected within the movie Alien. And I really wanted to talk about this because I actually took a course at university during my last year about Gothic literature. And I noticed when I was looking more critically into the film, there was a lot of elements within the movie that were just pure Gothic and Gothic literature and Gothic elements. And I don't know, I just thought it was really cool. I was like, oh my god, I learned this. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about how the Gothic literature is reflected within this movie and how Alien had its own take on it. So before I go too much into it, I'm kind of going to give you a little bit of a background on Gothic literature. So basically, it has a long history dating back to the 18th century. One of the first major Gothic works was the Castle of Otranto, and that was written by Horace Walpole in 1764. Great book, by the way. I actually read that one. It was a little choppy at times. However, you know, it's just, you gotta read it. It's like the beginning of Gothic, you know?
It's the foundation of a whole genre.
Exactly. What did I even say there? Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, so that kind of set the standard for other Gothic works, such as Dracula and Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, all that jazz, you know? So yeah, now we're gonna kind of talk a little bit about the different characteristics within the Gothic novels. So the term Gothic novel broadly refers to stories that combine elements from horror and romanticism. So the Gothic novel often deals with supernatural events or events occurring in nature that cannot be easily explained or which man has no control over. And it typically follows a plot of suspense and mystery. So now we're just going to talk a little bit about some characteristics of those. So first off, when you think of a Gothic novel, they are usually gloomy, have a decaying setting, whether that be at a haunted house, in a castle. Usually the setting is kind of interwoven with any secret passages or trapdoors and other mysterious architecture. Gothic literature usually includes supernatural beings or monsters, whether that be ghosts, vampires, zombies, giants, you name it, all the boys. Also, they would include curses or prophecies, damsels in distress, heroes, romance, or any intense emotions. So, how does this all relate to Alien? This is just so much info all at once. Holy smokes. So, a couple things that we pointed out were the appearance of the ship. So, the appearance of the ship is very interesting because it almost resembles a church. Like, if you look at how the ship is built, it has those long spires that go up, and that's very, you know, prominent in Gothic architecture. You have that very prominent pointy edges and like jagged edges, you know.
I think that what makes that so creepy and kind of out of place in Alien is because the ship in the Nostromo, when you first see it, it almost doesn't even look like it'd be able to fly because it looks like weirdly shaped.
Well,
And like
yeah,
it doesn't look like a lot of spaceships you see where they're like very smooth and
aerodynamic.
they look like planes kind of. This
Yeah.
looks like you said, like a giant building
Church.
almost. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't look like it should be able to fly, which makes it kind of weird and off-putting.
Yeah. Also, on the ship, there are a lot of tunnels within the ship, and that's a very prominent feature in Gothic literature and Gothic element. Also, the tunnels kind of create that sense of claustrophobia and kind of being trapped and not being able to escape. However, the duality of that is that in the movie Alien, you actually have those vast open spaces, like some of the major parts of the ship. And it's very interesting because they're just complete opposites. You have your claustrophobic tunnels, and then you have your wide open spaced.
And I think those are both equally scary because if you think about being on that ship with the creature like the xenomorph, if you're in the tunnels, obviously like it sneaks up on Dallas and kills him.
Mm-hmm.
That's scary. But at the same time, like if you're in like a big open room, it's almost like I don't know. This is something I found being in big churches and stuff like that. You almost be like, well, you can never see all of it at once, so you don't know
That's
what's
true.
behind you
Yes.
or like what's in the corner or like what's above you.
Yeah.
So both in both ways it can be creepy, but in different settings.
No, you're absolutely right. Another major element that we noticed was the appearance of the alien planet. And as I was mentioning before, usually with Gothic elements, they have a lot of dark and gloomy features. Well, the planet is a great example. When the scientists, they get off the ship, it's all kind of foggy and misty, and you got your thunder and lightning, and it's just can't really see too much. It's like murky atmosphere.
And then when they find the big alien ship, the round one, it is almost like that moment in any other like kind of Gothic film like Dracula when they first see the castle.
Yeah, it's
and
like,
it is kind of that foreboding.
Yeah, it's like, oh my god, what is this? Lastly, the supernatural element that's reflected in the movie is the alien itself. Like, it's not really, I guess, what we would consider a natural part of life. It's like, the beyond, like, oh, what is this thing? Also, one thing that I noted for that was the android in the film, because that's kind of off-putting as well. Like, it's not something that's natural.
Yeah, it kind of mixes like that science fiction and that supernatural element.
That's true. So those were a few of the elements that we noticed. However, one thing I want to briefly talk about, I don't want to go into too much detail, is terror versus horror that's reflected in the movie. Now, terror versus horror in Gothic literature is very important because it is. That's what my professor would say. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a reason. But basically, I'm going to kind of describe what the difference is, because when I was in school learning this course, I actually thought they were one and the same, that they were...
They're words that can be used, that most people use interchangeably, even though they do mean different things.
Yes. So, okay, basically, I'm going to give you a really, I guess, appropriate analogy, because we're talking about horror. So this is how I imagine terror. So imagine you're standing in front of your window, and you're looking across the street. And who do you see on the other side of the street? You see Jason Voorhees, this badass motherfucker. He's gonna come and get you. So how would you feel? How would that make you feel? How would that make you feel, Connor?
Scared.
Scared and anxious. You don't really know what's gonna
Tense.
happen. Tense. You feel that sense of anticipation. You don't really know. So that's what the sense of horror or terror kind of represents, is that feeling of anticipation. Now, the flip to that is the feeling of horror. So if you're imagining Jason, now he's walking across the street, he's broken into your house, and now he's holding you by the collar. What feelings do you feel? Oh, I don't know, intense feelings of panic and anxiety and worry, pain, all of the above. So that's kind of what horror is. So you have terror, which is the anticipation, and horror, which is the reality. So now if we're going to relate that back to Alien, we're going to talk about each. So starting with terror. So terror could kind of be reflected when the scientists are looking at the alien ship afar. So when they get onto that planet, and they're seeing that ship, they don't know what to expect, right? They don't know what to anticipate. So they're kind of scared. They have that sense of wonder and that sense of curiosity, like I just don't know. Um, Another element that could be reflected with terror is where is the alien in the ship? So when they're on their own ship, where has this alien escaped to, right? So they're looking and looking, but they can't find anything, but they're anticipating finding something. So the flip side to that would be the horror. So definitely the most prominent one would be fighting the alien directly, whether that be the full grown version or even the face hugger, whether that's coming directly at you or whether you're seeing it happen to somebody. So it's that sense of horror, like, oh my god, this is actually happening.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are just a few gothic elements that I think, or that we think, were kind of reflected in the movie.
And I think like that's another thing that I think that makes Alien such a classic is that it does combine all these different elements. Because on the face value, obviously it's a science fiction movie because it's in space, but obviously it has all these gothic elements. Like I think the core of the plot is almost like a gothic story. It's in the gothic genre for sure.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like we already mentioned, it also has elements of a slasher movie.
Yeah.
And the visceral horror of something like Texas Chainsaw. So it combines all these different elements, and like usually I feel like something like that would be a big mess, but Alien makes it work.
No, you're absolutely right. They do it almost seamlessly when they're trying to include all those different kinds of horror. You know.
Mm-hmm. So another major theme that we identified was obviously the sexual imagery and kind of just like the sexual themes of the movie.
Penis.
So the biggest one, obviously, to me is the life cycle of the alien, because it has multiple births, we could say. It first is born when it comes out of the egg, and then immediately as soon as that happens, when the facehugger attaches itself to Kane, and as they describe in the movie, basically forces like a tube down his throat. I mean, the facehugger was raping him.
You got to assert your dominance right there.
Like, it is. Like, even the writers of the movie have said, it's rape. Anytime a new alien is born, it's born from rape. So the facehugger kind of forcefully implants its offspring into kind of the victim's chest, or like inside of the victim. And then, so we talked about one birth obviously being the egg, and then obviously the second birth is when the chest burster physically forces itself out of the host's chest and gives a second, much more violent birth to its baby. Again, kind of like, it is kind of like rape as well. Like, I don't know, like it's kind of penetration.
Well, you have that force, right? And you're not in control of it. It's not like you're consenting to it. Like, yeah, I want this thing to pop out of my chest.
Yeah.
It just happens.
And then obviously we could say the third birth might be when it sheds its skin and grows into the larger version of itself. So all these different elements of birth and whatnot. I mean, and just like given the way the facehugger looks, I mean, obviously the like not spines on it, but it's like mandibles look like fingers, and looks like a hand grabbing you.
Yeah.
Again, in that kind of rape imagery.
Yeah.
But also, and then it obviously has its little like tube that it forces down the victim's throat.
Yeah.
But yet on the inside, when they actually dissect it after it dies, it's very vaginal looking.
Oh yeah.
The inside of it, like, it looks like a big vagina on the inside.
Yeah, which is gross.
You know? So it's kind of all this sexual imagery. Like, it's kind of, and that's the thing I like about it. Like, the alien doesn't necessarily look like male or female. It's almost kind of just this nebulous collection of sexual parts. You know?
Yeah.
And then obviously when the alien's full grown, it has a head that looks like a giant dick. And then when it opens its mouth, it has a smaller mouth inside that also looks like a dick. And then that dick bites the person's head and goes inside their face. Again, penetration.
Well, it kind of is representative, I guess, like of almost oral sex in a way.
Yeah.
Especially if it's going right in your head. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what I'm thinking of anyway.
Like, the writers of the film, I read somewhere, they even said that the monster and everything about like its life cycle and the way it's born is meant to play, the main fear that they meant to play off of is kind of the male fear of penetration, or the word they used was oral invasion.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's something that's kind of like I feel like is an unspoken fear among males, is like that kind of fear of, because for males it's not natural necessarily. Not, I mean, depending on what your preferences are, but I mean, for a straight male, it's not natural to be penetrated in that way, and that the alien plays on that fear.
You're right.
And again, like another scene that I noticed that again plays on this rape thing, but this time to females, is the scene where Lambert dies. Whenever the alien kills any of the males, it just kind of bites them and they're dead. Mm-hmm. But when the alien attacks Lambert, all you see is like that kind of its tail going between her legs and kind of crawling up her back of her leg towards her.
And you can kind of imagine what it's trying to imply.
And even the tail, like it's sharp and it's hooked, but it looks like a penis.
Yeah.
And like it looks like it's gonna like anally rape her.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's like it's that implication, and then you don't even see anything. All you hear is her scream.
Yeah. So
it leaves it up to the imagination of what you think could happen.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, a lot of sexual parts of the movie. So like we said, the alien represents a fear of sex through its multiple forms, and that kind of nebulous sexual aspect scares people, especially like I think it also could be more effective against a more, let's say, conservative audience.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like, the woman should stay at home and should stay buttoned up. I feel like the alien would really scare somebody like that because it's just
they'd be like, oh, that is absurd. How dare you?
Why are they British?
I don't know. Why not?
Yeah, because it's what's the word I'm looking for? Uncaged sexuality, basically.
Yeah. Because it's kind of just in your face, like, boom, this is what it is. We're not going to try to cover it up.
Mm-hmm. And then the second aspect of sexuality that I noticed in the movie was actually the ship, the Nostromo itself. Specifically the computer that runs the ship, which they call Mother. So basically, the ship kind of has boobs, or possibly balls, on the underside of the spires, which could represent dicks. When they go off on the smaller ship onto the planet, they kind of exit the ship through like this like umbilical cord that they have to cut.
Well, that's what they said in it, right? They said like release the umbilical or some
something like
shit
that.
Like that.
So it's like they kind of cut the cord of them and go away from the safety of the mother's womb to the danger of the planet.
That's really deep.
Obviously, another sexual image is the giant vaginas on the alien ship that they have to go through.
Oh, yeah. That's pretty obvious. Like, come on.
They're pretty big. And just even the room in the Nostromo itself where they talk to the computer it looks like a womb. It's very warm lighting and like circular and like soft looking.
Yeah, and it makes you almost feel safe when you're inside.
Exactly. Even though the mother in the movie, the company, is evil.
Crazy bitch.
And obviously the other connection I think is with that is kind of the android, because the android Ash is the only one who's actually working for Mother, for the company, and he's seen drinking milk in the film. When he actually gets hurt, it's not blood that comes out, it's kind of like this milky liquid. And obviously the interpretation there is that it's Mother's milk.
Or it could be kind of seen as being like semen,
mm-hmm.
However you want to interpret it.
Yeah, and then finally, they kill the alien by expelling it from the safety of the ship, or the safety of the womb, and into the coldness and the danger of space. Yeah. So, again, I think there's all these kinds of sexual imagery and sexual aspects that you can look at in the film. And a big part of that, one last thing I want to say is from the designs of H.R. Giger, who designed the alien and the alien ship and the alien planet, because his work, if you've ever seen his art, is very like, it's basically, he describes it as a combination of the biological and the mechanical, and it's like this sexual combination of the two, and it's all like weird kind of genitalia and stuff.
Is this guy okay?
He's dead now.
Oh, he's not okay. Fuck. And yeah, one last important thing that I noticed that Connor didn't notice, and I'm glad I noticed this, is the cat in the film. And as we're talking about sexuality, what's another name for a cat? Pussy!
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's all I had to say. All right, moving on.
Anyways, so the next theme that we identified was kind of the gender relations in the film. I think this film plays on gender relations quite a bit. Um, Obviously, the main one is that the ship, the control center of the ship, is called Mother, like we said, and it controls them all. Like it wakes them up from their sleep. It controls what they do. So it's interesting that it's mostly a crew of males, like strong males, but they're all controlled by their mother. That's one gender aspect of the film. Obviously, another one, and the biggest one, is that the only person to survive the film, other than the cat, is a female, Ripley. And Ripley is definitely a strong female character, I think, because once Ash is gone, sorry, not Ash, Dallas, Ripley takes over the leadership of the ship. Leadership of the ship.
Of the ship, of the ship, of the
um,
ship.
Despite the fact that there's obviously still strong male characters in uh, gosh, I can't remember his name. The African American guy. Um,
I don't know.
so like she kind of takes over the leadership and is strong and tries to show that she can do it. And not only is she the strongest, but she's also the smartest and the best survivor. I mean, like when she sees the
Yeah.
alien in that hallway, she like goes back and tries to stop the detonation, but then eventually faces the alien head on and is brave.
Yeah.
Um, and then the final kind of gender relation thing that I noticed was that Ash, the robot, when he's actually trying to kill Ripley, takes a porno magazine and rolls it up and tries to insert it into Ripley's mouth orally to choke her to death. Which, even though you think an android couldn't have sexual feelings, um, maybe it's like just like a weird urge or something because he's almost human, right?
Well, maybe it's like learned behavior in a
Yeah.
way. Maybe he sees that on the ship and it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I
Let
mean,
me try that out.
yeah, it's like definitely just a weird kind of gender thing because you'd think he would be genderless, but he still has male characteristics.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think those are basically the main kind of themes that we want to talk about. We've kind of mentioned all of them at least in passing. So now we want to talk about kind of the fears that the film plays on.
Yeah, so definitely the fear of isolation, for them being just in space, by themselves, doing their...
Well, like the tagline of the film says, in space, no one can hear you scream.
That is true. That is true. Very true. Second fear would be not knowing everything about the people around you or having suspicion. Um, Fear of a large corporate entity that doesn't care about your life. So that would be Ash and just the company that they work for. Fear of rape or forced pregnancy and labor. Fear of not knowing what you're up against. And lastly, fear of alien beings unknown to us with dangerous killing potential.
That last one being obviously the most obvious.
Yeah.
So, I mean, final thoughts. I think that this is a really good movie because it is essentially, in its plot, a B monster movie. But it elevates itself into an A level through, like, excellent filmmaking, a wonderful design of everything, a good script, excellent actors, and, like, original ideas that I think help elevate it. And that's why I think it's such a classic and is still loved today.
Yeah. You pretty much said it. I don't know. Like I said, I can't really say too much on this, other than the fact that I really enjoyed the film. It was my first time seeing it, and it was an overall great experience. And I'd be interested in watching many more of the movies in either the Alien franchise or the Alien vs. Predator one.
Well, I mean, definitely you got to watch Aliens because that's like another classic. There's some people who even say Aliens is better than Alien.
I will be the judge of that.
The other two are terrible, and Alien vs. Predator franchise is terrible, but is a heck of a lot of fun. I love the Alien vs. Predator movies so much. I love watching them. I would watch those movies anytime. They're just so much fun.
Yeah.
So,
well, aside from that, we hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Let us know what you think If you have any suggestions, send them to us at spooknotes@gmail.com. Of course, you can always follow us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and YouTube.
Just by searching up Spook Notes podcast?
Yep. Search that up.
Well, thank you very much for listening.
Yeah. See you later. And don't forget to cite the spook notes.
Bye.
Bye.